I think my camera's gonna die before I even get this intro done. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. And if you're new here, my name is Linnea. Welcome to my channel. Have my cappuccino here. It's a little cold now. It's really cold now. Okay, that's cool. For today's video, I wanted to talk about the bar exams. So before I get into anything, I'll start by saying I live in Canada and I also live in Ontario. So my experience with the bar exam only relates to my experience writing the Ontario bar exam in Canada. I'm hoping my tips will be helpful for people who are writing the bar exam in other provinces or other countries, but I can't guarantee that. I'm not sure what those exams look like, but I can tell you what I know about the Ontario bar exam, and that's what I'm gonna do today. So if you're interested in hearing my tips on the Ontario bar exam, then just keep watching. So for those of you who don't know, the bar exam is a licensing examination. So it is the exam that you write in order to become a licensed lawyer. In Ontario, the exam is offered in June, November, and March. I'm gonna be licensed in 2019, so I wrote the exam in June, but I could have also written it in November or in March and still qualify to be licensed in next June 2019, I believe. So the exam is actually two exams. So it's two 7-hour exams. So there's a barrister exam and the solicitor exam, and they're 2 weeks apart. I already have to look something up because I can't remember. Good start, good start. Hold on, please. So the first exam is the barrister exam. So that covers civil procedure, criminal procedure, family law, and public law. The solicitor's exam is 2 weeks later. It includes real estate, estate planning, and business law. Now, both exams also have professional responsibility kind of weaved in. Those are kind of what's on each exam. And before I continue, you can also write the exams separately. So a lot of people did the barrister's exam in June, and then they deferred their second exam, and they're doing the solicitor's exam in November. So you can do that too. I personally just wanted to get it out of the way. I feel like right when I'm done school, I'm kind of still in the school mode, still like in study mode. So I thought it would be the best time to do it, and I just didn't want to prolong the pain. So I did them both right away, and I got lucky and passed them. You can kind of choose what works for you. If you have a lot going on in like June, or in May and June, maybe you just want to write one and not the other, or maybe you want to defer both. It's up to you. Some people need a break after law school. It's a lot, you know? So some people want a break and they just want to do it later, and that's totally fine too. Now for my tips. So my first tip for studying for the bar exam is to make a schedule and stick to it. You have to determine how many days you have to study. So for me, I had 6 weeks before the first exam and after I finished my last law school exams. So I took 1 week off and I had 5 weeks to study. I wanted to study for 5 days a week. I wanted the weekends off, and I didn't want to work in the evenings if possible. So I calculated based on that how many pages I had to read every day. So for me, it was about 80 to 100 pages. Once you set that goal, I can't stress this enough, stick to it. Some people would read 35 pages one day and 65 another day. And I went to a bar exam prep tips kind of panel before the exam, and that's what people had said. You know, some days they read more than other days. And that might work for some people, but I don't recommend that, because what happens is you read 35 pages today, and then you got to recalculate for tomorrow how many pages you got to read tomorrow to make up for all the pages you didn't read today. And you're going to have to do that every time. And guess what? You're probably not going to. So you're going to get behind, and then you're going to have to either work overtime to be reading all those extra pages towards the end, or you're just not going to finish reading the material. I don't recommend that. I think the best thing you can do, and I think the best thing I did, was set a goal, and every single day I read those 80 pages, no matter how much it sucked. And if I was finished a little bit early, because some days I did, I finished at 2:30, some days 4:30. If I was reading material that was relatively easy for me to get through, I would read a little bit more. So there was a couple days I read 100 pages. Not many, but a couple. But there was never a day that I read less than 80 pages. I just didn't want to get behind. I had a goal, and I think that's the key. You have to stick to your page numbers, no matter how annoying it is, no matter what. Like, maybe a couple of days you could read a little less, but I would not recommend being too flexible with it, because you will lose time. You'll get behind, and then you won't be able to catch up. So that would be my number one tip. I think that is probably the most important. Well, Maybe it's not the most important, but for right now it is. My next tip, I don't know that everybody did this. I only know that I did this. But I finished reading all of the materials, so all the barristers and all the solicitor materials before the first exam, before the barrister's exam. The reason this is important to me and the reason I had set out to do that is because between the two exams, you only have 2 weeks. And for me, I also had my graduation in between those. So I knew I would be taking a few days off because my family would be in town. And I just wouldn't have time to do all this extra reading. It's only 2 weeks. It's not enough to do all the materials. Do all of the reading if you can before the first exam. I finished about a week and a half, I think, before the barrister's exam. I had read all of the materials, and then I used that last, I think it was about a week and a half, to do practice tests. I would really recommend that. I would recommend reading all of the material if you can before the first exam so that it's out of the way. And then you can always refresh your memory right before the solicitor's exam and do some practice tests, whatever. But I think your best bet is to read all the material first. I know some people who said that they didn't even read the materials and they passed the exam. I don't suggest that. It might work for some people. They might get lucky. I don't recommend that. You should read the materials so that you're at least familiar with it. I wouldn't suggest trying to read them multiple times. You won't have time. If I haven't said this already, the bar exam materials are like 2,000 pages. So you don't have time to read them multiple times. You only have one shot. Unless you want to read for like hours and hours and hours and hours a day, every single day, you don't have time to read it twice. But you absolutely do have time to read it once, and you also have time to refresh your memory and kind of reread and skim some things. So don't stress too much about reading it more than once, but I do recommend getting through it at least one time. And try and get through it before the first bar exam. I think that that's a really helpful thing to do, just to keep you on track. Now, along the same lines of reading the material only once, another tip of mine is to minimize distractions as much as possible and really, really focus when you're reading. So studying for the bar exam, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time. Like, you can't just all of a sudden know all of the material. You have to pace yourself and digest it as you go, but you gotta be focused when you're reading. Like, let me just say, if you're gonna read 80 pages in a day, you definitely don't wanna have to read them again because you weren't paying attention. There were times when I was studying that I would read a page and not remember what I read and have to read it again, but try and minimize that happening as much as possible. The thing is, you're not going to be able to learn all of the material. And that should be another tip in and of itself. It's not about learning the material and understanding it fully and being able to apply it. It's about being able to find it. In the actual bar exam, you have about 1 minute and 40 seconds to answer each question. So you don't really have time to actually remember all the material and kind of scan your brain for it. You have to just be able to find it. So don't stress too much about learning the material and understanding it inside out, but definitely try and pay attention while you're reading so that you don't have to reread things. And remember, it's not about learning the material, it's ultimately just about finding it. My next tip is, well, it's not really a tip, it's about highlighting. So while I was reading, I did highlight some things. It was suggested that you have kind of different colors and you highlight cases in one color, numbers, so section numbers or just amounts in one color, highlight just generally important information in another color. I kind of did that. I don't know that it was very helpful. Some people found that helpful. I don't know that it did anything. I mean, some of the highlighting was useful, but not really. Ultimately, when I was looking for the material, I might have started by going to the highlighted parts, but I don't know that it really helped that much. It just, to be honest, highlighting just makes you feel good because it makes you feel like you're actually doing something. You're like, oh yeah, that's so important. Let me just highlight that. And you feel like you're getting it, but I don't think it really helps that much. My suggestion is just do whatever makes you feel good. If it makes you feel good to highlight, then highlight. I wouldn't recommend highlighting the whole thing. First of all, you'll go through a lot of highlighters. I think I went through like 3 highlighters and I don't even know if it helped. So, but if it makes you feel good, if it makes you feel like you're absorbing the material, by all means, go ahead. My next tip is to buy an index. When I went to that bar exam prep tips panel, they kept talking about indexes for like so long and I had no clue what they were talking about. So an index is exactly what you think it is. They're commercially created, so you have companies who create an index, and it's basically, it has on it keywords, and then it has the page number that they can be found on and what side of the page it's on. So the bar exam materials, like it'll be like a page and then there's 2 columns, you know, like a newspaper kind of. So it'll tell you what page the material's on, and it will tell you, like it'll have which side of the page it's on for each keyword. So the reason you would buy an index and the reason people find them helpful is because when you get a question on the bar exam, it'll ask you about whatever it asks you about. And there will be probably a key word, something that kind of you think about when you're reading the question, like, oh, it's about this. And then you go to your index, you find the keyword, and then it will bring you to the section in your materials where you can actually find the information to answer the question. I thought it was a great investment. I'm happy I bought one. They are expensive, but you can get group rates if you get a whole bunch of your classmates together to buy them. And you can also add your own keywords to it based on what you're reading, like how you remember things. So that's helpful. The only downside that's related to that with an index is that somebody else is creating it. So somebody else is deciding what words are the key words, what triggers them in their mind to think about something, and then you kind of have to go along with it. So if that's not how you think, it can be a little bit difficult. That's cool, my camera's dying. Awesome. That would be the only kind of issue with them. And sometimes they are missing things. Like I found a couple of things that I had to add to mine because it wasn't in the materials, but it also helps you study to find your own keywords as well. Some people do update indexes, so they'll get an old one from a previous year and then they go through and they find the new page numbers for all the keywords. You can do that if that helps you study, cool. I wouldn't suggest that. That seems like a lot of unnecessary work in my opinion. I would just buy one. But if that helps you study, go ahead. Whatever works for you. I really hope my camera's not gonna die, but I think it is. So that's cool. Another tip is to focus a lot on professional responsibility. This topic, like I said at the beginning, is weaved into both exams throughout every section. So you really got to have a good handle on it. And part of the reason it's weaved in is because in your real life practice as a lawyer, you have to be able to identify when you have an ethical issue. You have to know when it comes up. It's not going to be so apparent. So you have to be able to identify it on the exam. You have to know when the question you're being asked is a professional responsibility question versus just a real estate question, so that you can actually find it in the materials. So focus a lot on that. There's a lot of questions about that on both exams, and it's just really important for being a lawyer. You want to know all of the rules and the bylaws, so focus a lot on that. I read it one time for the barrister's exam, and then I went over it and kind of skimmed it before the solicitor's exam. I didn't reread it entirely, but you definitely want to have that in your mind and make it an important focus for your studying. Am I gonna make it? My next tip is practice exams. Practice exams, in my opinion, were the best way to study. When you purchase an index, if you purchase a commercial index, you actually get practice exams with it. So I got a practice barrister's exam and a practice solicitor's exam, and that was great. I will say the practice exams aren't as difficult as the actual exam, so the questions are a little bit easier, and nobody actually knows ahead of time what questions are going to be on the bar exam. So just be aware that there are no sample exams out there. You're never going to find an exam that's written by the Law Society with sample questions. There's a couple on their website, and those are helpful. I also did those ones, but you're never gonna find an actual sample exam. These practice exams are just based off of people's anecdotes. So what people say were the kinds of questions were on the exam, and based on some kind of studies that these commercial entities undergo. It's not actually related to the Law Society, so just be aware of that. But they are helpful. It's just a great way to practice using your index, to practice the kinds of questions you're gonna get asked. Some of them are hard. Like, I'm not saying they're really easy, but I think on the whole, they are a little bit easier than the actual exams. I found them really helpful, and I, to be honest, found it the only real way to study adequately. So I actually purchased another set of practice exams. So when you buy them, you get, a practice barrister and a practice solicitors. So I got the ones with my index, and I also purchased another set as well. I just found that to be a really great way to study, and I'm really happy I did that. I think that helped me so much just in understanding the kinds of questions I would be asked. So I really recommend that. I know not everybody has the money to pay for them because they are expensive. I think it was 100 and something for my second set that I purchased. So they're not cheap, but if you have the money, I would recommend it. I think it was really helpful. Some people do circulate some old kind of practice questions as well. Again, they're not actual sample questions from the Law Society, but they are helpful. So if you can get your hands on those, that would also be helpful. I would really recommend practice exams to get used to using your index and to see what kinds of questions you're going to be asked on the actual bar exam. So my last tips for preparing for the bar exam, again, as I said already a couple of times, it's not about learning the material, it's about being able to find it. So make sure you're practicing using your index, or there's also a detailed table of contents that some people found helpful. It just had, all the headings and subheadings, so that might be useful to you as well. But get used to your materials and get used to finding things. That's gonna be the best way that you can study, because you're not gonna be able to learn all the material and remember it. So just keep that in mind. For binding the materials, so some people brought in binders to the exam. One thing you should know about the bar exam is that whatever you bring in, whatever paper materials, you can't bring those out. So if you bring in binders, you're not going to be able to take them out again. So I don't recommend that. I would suggest getting the material bound, like go to an actual place and get it bound. So what I did for binding is I bound my index together. So my barrister's index, I bound it all together, and I had tabs, like legal tabs, the actual, full-size paper tab. I tabbed each section. So the public law section, the family law section, I would suggest doing that. That way you can just flip through the materials quicker. And then I bound each section separately. So when you go into the exam, for the morning of the first day, let's say you're doing the barrister's exam and it's the morning section, you'll probably have two sections you're doing. So maybe criminal law and public law. So you want to have each section bound separately so that you're not flipping through all of your materials every time. You're just flipping through that one topic. So I would suggest binding each topic separately and then having your index as a separate thing so that you can, find the keyword in the question, find it in your index, and then move to your materials and flip through and find it. That would be my suggestion. And then I bound the rules of professional responsibility together with the bylaws, and then I had obviously professional responsibility separately. And I also included tabs every 20-ish pages. Again, the whole page legal tabs. I think my camera's gonna die. I would suggest using those because it just helps you move through the materials quicker. So you're not going through this whole big section every time. So add legal tabs and bind each section separately and your index separately, and you'll be good to go. The last information that I have, the last tips I have, I'm hoping my camera's not gonna die, but I think it might, is about the day of the exam. The night before, obviously do your best to sleep as well as you can. It's very hard, obviously. Some people find it easy, I didn't. But try and get as much rest as you can. The day before, I didn't study like crazy. I did a bit of a review just to keep things fresh, but I wasn't sitting there reading everything and doing all these practice questions, and I was kind of trying to take it easy. Practice a little bit, just for a couple of hours, but nothing crazy. Don't get yourself tired the day before the exam. And then on the day of the exam, what you have to do is when you get there, you have to sign in, and then you also have to go through security. So get there early. I believe they suggest you get there between 7 and 8:30 a.m. I, of course, being me, got there at 7 every time. I would suggest that. Get there early, then you have a chance to kind of chill a little bit. You go register, and then you go through security. And in security, they're actually gonna take away, you can't bring a cell phone, you can't bring any pens and pencils and stuff like that. So they'll take away any of that stuff. They'll take away any bags that you have, and then you don't get the materials back at the end. Just make sure you get there early enough, because there will be lines at security, and if you're the kind of person that gets stressed out by the thought of being late, like me, get there early so that you avoid all of that. And then once you get there, they'll sit you down, and you can either sit there, you can kind of converse with people, go to the washroom, kind of just get yourself settled. In Ottawa, the exam is written at a convention center. It's basically an airplane hangar. So it's a giant room, and you get a 6-foot desk per every person. So you have a lot of room to spread out your materials. And it's just a giant room with, however many hundreds of people, and there's a giant clock on the wall at the front. So that's kind of what the room looks like. Bring earplugs because it will be noisy. And if somebody starts panicking beside you, you don't want to be able to hear it. I know that sounds cruel, but it's the truth. Bring food and water with you so you can I think you can bring as much water as you can. It just has to be in a clear bottle. And then you can bring a baggie of materials. So you'll have your Law Society card, and then you can bring, I think I had lip balm. You can bring Kleenex, you just won't be able to take it out at the end of the day, so don't bring too much. And then you can bring snacks. So try and bring some healthier snacks, things that are easy to eat. Don't bring anything smelly or really loud because you won't be able to eat it in there because it's too distracting for other people. I didn't eat a ton during the exam because you're kind of anxious the whole time, you know? I did eat something though. You definitely have to have something because you sit there for 3.5 hours per session. You'll have 3.5 hours and then a lunch break and then another 3.5 hours. So it's a long time to sit there, so you gotta make sure you have some kind of food and some water. The exam itself, I believe, started at 9 o'clock and you wrote till 12:30. And then I think we came back again at 2:30 and wrote till 6. It's a 2-hour lunch break, but not really, because by the time you get out at the end, like before the lunch break, and then you have to go through security again to get back in. So it does take away some time. So it's probably about an hour. And you could just sit kind of in the vicinity. You could sit outside if you wanted, go to your car, whatever, and just eat your lunch. And then you came back in for another 3.5 hour session. It does take a minute to get through everything because they have a lot of procedures that they have to explain before the exam starts, which is why you have to be seated, I believe, at 8:30. And you start at 9 because they go through everything with you at the beginning. Other than that, take deep breaths a lot. It will be fine. You've written exams before. It's nothing new. It's tiring. I will say that. The first exam, I was exhausted by the end of the day. The second one, I wasn't as tired though, because I knew what to expect, and it wasn't that bad. You know, it feels like it's gonna be just the worst thing ever, but it's not. It's just like any other exam you've written. If you've written a multiple choice exam before, I don't know if I said it's multiple choice, but it is. It's just like that. It's nothing crazy. It really isn't. It's just another exam, and it's a long one, but you will get through it. Just make sure you have snacks. Make sure you're prepared. You've read all the materials. If you got to the bar exam, you've gotten through your undergrad or law school, whatever, you will get through the bar exam. And if you fail, it's not a big deal because you can always rewrite it again. If you fail it in June, you can rewrite it in November. If you fail it in November, you can rewrite it in March. It's not the end of the world. And it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It's literally just about time management. Tying into that, when you're actually writing the exam, don't waste time on questions that you don't know the answer to. Start by going through all of the questions that you know. Don't spend any more than maybe a minute. Like if I read a question and I couldn't figure out what to do within the first 30 to 40 seconds, I just skipped it. And some of them I skipped even sooner than that if it was just totally out of my league. And then you come back to them at the end. The actual exam itself has around 240 questions every time. I'm not sure exactly how many. Roughly 120 questions per section. So start with the ones you know for sure. Try and answer them all though. Like just put something down and then just circle it so you come back to it. Because the worst thing you could do is not answer at all and then not have time to go back. So for every question you go through, put an answer down. It could be totally out of left field, and that's fine. Just put an answer down and just remember to circle it and go back to it. But just don't get bogged down in all the questions that you don't know right off the bat, because it's just gonna stress you out and you're gonna waste time. So just go through it and do the stuff that you know and come back to it later. And if you have to guess, you have to guess. Everybody does. There's no way to know every single question. So it's totally fine if you have to wing a few. You know, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean you're gonna fail. Remember, it's all about just being able to find the answers. It's not about knowing the material, and it doesn't make you stupid if you don't know the answers. And it doesn't make you stupid if you fail either. So just relax. I know that does absolutely nothing. It did nothing to me when people told me to relax, but all you can do is relax and do your best. You've written exams before, and you'll be just fine. So my camera just died, and it's probably gonna die again before I even finish this. But that was the end of the video anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it's helpful for any of you who are writing the bar exams coming up at any point. I hope it puts you at ease in some way and gives you some useful tips for how to study and how to prepare for the day of the bar exams. So yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. By the way, I want to do an articling video, but I think the best way for me to do that is to just answer some of your questions. So if you have any questions about my articling experience so far or articling in general, then put them in the comments below and I will answer them in a future video about articling. So yeah, I'm going to sit here and enjoy my ice cold coffee, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!